Mahadeva Namah Shivaya Sada Shiva 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 Mahadeva Namah Shivaya Sada Shiva. Kali Mahakali Namakalika Namo Namah Kali Kali Mahakali Namakalika Namo Namah.
Om Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmastam Yenu Pashanti Diraha Tesham Shanti Shashvati Netresham. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. The wise ones realize that one is dwelling in their very self. To them belong peace and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Hairanmaya Parevra Koshevarajan Brahmanishkalam Tachu Brahm Jyotisham Jyoti Tadyadatma Vidho Vidduhu. Shining like burnished gold, highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings, partless and indivisible, free of any taint, the essence of everything which all beings seek, knowingly or unknowingly, there shines Brahman. It is that which the Guru teaches. It is that which the wise ones exult in. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. We are back to the second half of our class on the subject of devotion of non-separation, and this particular one we were looking at is the 3 obstacles to realization. And we talked about it in terms of what the Sanskrit calls ahamta mamata. Aham means, of course, I, so it's this false sense of I. And so we were trying to see through the sense of ownership. One of the things that keeps us from realizing the devotion of non-separation is we're devoted to too many things. To a wide variety of things. We spread ourselves too thin, as the saying goes. So we try and develop fealty to one principle, which probably means good for you to have one guru, one path, and dig one deep well, as they say, so you'll strike water. And after that, then spreading out is not surface spreading out anymore. It's more leaning towards universalism that Sri Ramakrishna epitomizes so well. But in the meantime, these obstacles, generally speaking, are sense of ownership and sense of agency, kartritya. And then what we didn't finish out was more pertinent to our subject of devotion of non-separation, the sense of separation. Vibhaga is a Sanskrit word that could be used. Sri Ramakrishna loved to tell stories about Prahlada, one of the great seers of India. because his situation is one coming out of a very dark background in life and then emerging as a realized soul, which is much more impressive than taking a good moral person and turning him into a realized soul. It's to take somebody who's very under the press, under the gun, in the darkness, and turning them into a realized soul makes a much more profound effect on the seers. So that was the case with Prahlada. So drawing a quote here from Sri Ramakrishna, he says, in terms of sense of separation, Prahlada had two moods. Sometimes he would feel that he was God. In that mood he would say, "Thou art verily I." But when he was conscious of his ego, he looked upon God as his master and himself as the servant. So they say that having one ideal is good, but quite often for the sincere devotee who wants to go deeper into spiritual life, you do have to learn to hold two ideals. Sri Ramakrishna told another story about that. A man sees a rose on a bush and he reaches out to pick it. He gets the rose, but he also pricks his finger on a thorn and comes back bleeding. And so he's, rubbing his finger, and somebody asks him, "Oh, that's too bad. Didn't that hurt?" And he said, "It's nothing." So, in a rather cryptic story, that the meaning isn't so obvious on the two ideals. He was able to hold one ideal that's very beautiful, but the other one is rather painful, but it's necessary for him in order to make spiritual advancement. And he considers it nothing to try and to suffer that pain in order for the sake of making spiritual progress. So many times that's the case when we approach a non-dual state of mind. Sometimes some of us are destined to hold more than one ideal. Like our founder, Lex Hickson, he used to say to me, "I hold joint citizenship in at least four different religious traditions of the world." Vedanta was his ground, Buddhism, Orthodox, Greek, Eastern Christianity, and Sufism. He became a sheikh of the al-jerrahi order toward the end of his life. So he held four different religious traditions. And when I asked him about it, he would say, "I never mixed them. I always just concentrate on one of them for a time, and that's how I've done it." So I remember having a dream once, because I was a musician and I played many different kinds of music. My grounding was in classical Western. Then I branched out into raga, Eastern. Then I branched out and played jazz and did such different kinds of music as bluegrass with my brothers. So we did all sorts of music. I had a dream one night that I was standing in a building with many halls, and the doors were all open, and these different kinds of music were all going on. And it was a cacophony, a horrible cacophony. So when I went and closed the doors and just opened one, I could enjoy the music that was coming out of that. And I'd shut that door, open another, and I could enjoy that music. So it was a dream that was meant to say, don't mix things indiscriminately. Extract the essence out of the one that you're wanting to learn, and that's done by some long and steady study of one system. So that's something to say about this tendency of spiritual menu tasting that people are into. It's really not going very far to help them destroy the sense of agency, the sense of ownership, and the sense of separation. It's actually thickening those walls, those borders, in many cases. So there's some very subtle spiritual innuendos and mechanisms, practices you can use to thin those walls. Like, say, thin the wall of the ego so that you can see your true self rather than your false self. As he was saying here, it's a matter of the unripe ego. See, I do good to others, I am the doer, my actions are important, that's a sign of the unripe ego. Whereas of myself I do nothing, is how Sri Ramakrishna used to say. Mother Kali does everything through me, I don't do anything. I'm just a bunch of sticks tied together with string, and she's operating the main string, you see, and she moves me here and there. And he used to sing songs like Shakale, Tomari Icha, Mother, others call work their own, but all work really belongs to you. And the lines of the song say, I'm the chariot, you're the charioteer, I'm the house, you're the indweller, I move as you move me, I speak as you speak through me. Very beautiful songs they used to sing that really epitomized the level of consciousness he had reached about diminishing the ego, so that he would practically was egoless. I don't think you can cite another great soul in history who was as egoless as Sri Ramakrishna. That was one of his main qualities, is that the ego was so transparent. He couldn't shut a door or button a shirt. He couldn't own a thing or hold a thing for any time. If so, you put a gold coin in hand, his arm would atrophy, would experience atrophy, he would actually have pain. So he was very, very sensitive. He ate very little. They say he, hard to almost see him glide across as if his feet were not touching the ground. He had some very, very sattvic nature, I guess is a good way of putting it, for lack of a better term. Whereas Vivekananda was, his main disciple was like feet on the ground, bull by the horns. He could go anywhere, do anything, eat anything, and mastered the world that way. We celebrate him on this 150th birth centenary of his. So fortunate to have a soul like that come to earth. Holy Mother used to say about him, Naren, he's like one of those souls that sits in meditation for 700 years at a time and doesn't move. Though he would go to a very high realm, beyond form, and just abide there. And if you look at this chart, 700 years isn't very long. So you don't have to be that impressed. But he said he's like a wooden statue when he meditates. He's just gone. So he's dwelling in his formless nature, and a lot of that has to do with overcoming the sense of separation, sense of agency, and sense of ownership. So this sense of separation is the most subtle of these three. These are pretty obvious when you see an egotistic person and a person who's got a lot of pride in wealth and all of that. Like this song I sang, it's pretty obvious, but the sense of separation is very difficult to root out of oneself. I used to when I saw the monks come from India and teach the householders here in the West, the Westerners seeing a renunciate and a monk from an ascetic walk of life and run of life would always feel guilty. They would admire this monastic person with all the spiritualization, but they would have all this wealth and all this land and all these children. And so immediately the Judeo-Christian kind of mindset comes forward and you start feeling guilty about this. So it kind of missed the point. And so to have the realized souls come from monasticism, monks, swamis, roshis, rinpoches, different walks of life and different religions is a very great opportunity to imbibe the best of monasticism, but you don't want to change your own destiny. You see, basically, Krishna put it very nice in the Gita when he said, better a poor life lived dharmically than living another's dharma. So you're better off working out your own P's and Q's, as neutralizing your own karma and moving forward with that kind of progress. But when you want to distill, like we did in the early days of SRV, as I was saying, the problems that Jnana Yoga and philosophy from the East puts forward to the West, you can pretty much put it in this Triputi. That's the main stumbling blocks for people. And as I say, they start from gross and they get subtle and then they get causal. When we're talking about the sense of separation and the ego, you're at the level of a very causal. If you know what I mean by the word, it's about the only word in English that works. It's the primal cause of everything. It's the reason why you took separate birth, and when you separated yourself out from Brahman. You took on a separate form when that's a misnomer. It's a misconnection. It's a misconception. You cannot be separate from Brahman. Your very nature is that. So somehow, as they say in the Jnana Yoga teachings, you take a jar and you dip it into a lake and you cap it off, and that's the ego. Water's inside the jar, water's in the lake. But in order to return the two, you put the jar underwater, take a rock, and break the jar, and water becomes one with water. So that jar, you might say a jar of 5 different colors, surrounds this Atman. And as it gets lighter and lighter, the glass, you see, Then it gets to this ego. It's a very transparent thing, and it's very hard to get rid of. So that sense of separation is very well defined by looking at a subtle sheath like the Anandamaya Kosha, because in meditation, you come upon the light at some time. You really can actually see the light. And sometimes, depending on what chakra you're at, the clouds will roll back, as it were, and you'll just see this perfect cylindrical third eye straight into another land. Words, of course, fail to try and describe it. So when that happens, this sense of separation kicks in. So you say, well, I'm going to die if I go there. That's the end of me. It's really a return to your source, but the ego is trying to claim its territory. It's trying to keep you from having the experience of formlessness. So trepidation arises, and you back off from the profound experience you're about to have, which probably took you lifetimes, if not decades of practice to reach in the first place. It's a great opportunity. And Sri Ramakrishna used to talk about this clock in Calcutta back in the 1800s that somebody had put up. It had all these gears, and they were all rotating and turning, different size gears, in a glass casing, so you could see it all working. He said once every 365 days, once a year, the gears would line up and you could actually see through the clock to the other side. So he used that analogy for this rarity of spiritual experience when it happens to a person, when their gears are all lined up, when the karma is in abeyance, when the mood is sattvic, when the mind is in a non-dual state, when conditions are right in terms of relationships and family and work and all that. It's very rare to have something line up like that perfectly and you can just see the truth. But it does happen to people. And Sri Ramakrishna said it even happens to ordinary people sometime that moment occurs to them. Riding a bike on a football field, who knows where and when. He said in their case it's like the sunbeam falling on the lotus. The blue lotus is very rare and it opens only in the sun, but when a cloud passes in front of the sun and the sunlight goes away, then it closes back up because it can't bear being without sunlight. So that's the case of the ordinary person who has this profound experience, this epiphany, but then immediately loses it, cannot hold on to it. So it takes years of practice to develop the steadiness to even reach a place where you could actually see the interference of and the insidious nature of this sense of separation represented by ahamkara, the ego. And there are many levels of philosophy that it can happen on. For instance, I am a Buddhist. See, that's an ego. That's the ego speaking. There's a teaching in Buddhism called the 10 lands. And by the time you get to the 6th, 7th, 8th land, by the time the bodhisattva has really perfected himself, he has to give up thinking of himself as a Buddhist. Because he's there to help all sentient beings, right? How can he help Christians and Muslims if he's a Buddhist? They're not going to want him around, you see. So all of a sudden he has to become egoless, like Ramakrishna was. Can't even close a door or button a shirt. And all of a sudden I'm just wide open. I am the open space beyond all religion, is how our founder, Lex Sixon, put it in one of his classes. Toward the end of his life, he was teaching a series called Open Space Beyond Religion. So the ego can attack on many different ways like that, not just the usual way that we think pride, arrogance, and so forth. The ego in Sanskrit, ahamkara, does not usually refer to somebody arrogant and prideful and piggish and stupid and animal-like. It refers more to a principle that's holding the glue that's holding name and form together, holding our concept of a world together. And if it goes, so will that concept. And that's called samadhi by the seers. It probably is called death by the worldly people, but it's called samadhi by the seers. They want that release. At the break, I was talking to one of you and mentioning that people like Dalai Lama and Chief Joseph, and take completely different cultures and different walks of life and speak to a few of the higher mucky-mucks that inhabit them, as we say in Hawaii, and you'll find out that both of them are looking forward to their death. Dalai Lama said that to me directly at the Waikiki Shell one time when I was playing music for one of his talks. We Tibetans look forward to the day of our death. See? Well, for 1,300 years, since 700 AD, by the time Milarepa and Marpa had brought over the Indian yogiism, and from Naropa and Talopa, and it had distilled in the form of Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet, they'd had Rinpoches at their bedside guiding them into the death state. And the Book of the Dead was out there and people knew about it. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm dying. I want my family around me. Or I don't want my family around me, whatever the case may be. Give me peace. But it's not like you're thinking, this is the beginning of my afterlife. This is the end of life. So you're laboring under that sense of misconception that death and birth are real. So if you have somebody guiding you through the Bardo states, this is what really equivalent to the Bardo states in the Tibetan Book of the Dead are the Akashas and the Lokas in Hinduism, in Vedanta, in the Vedic way of saying, and in the Tantric way of saying, pretty much equivalent. You can see the correlations almost directly. And also with the chakras in the Kundalini system, the correlations are very close. So that's what I wanted to say about this to finish it up. The sense of separation being very, very subtle, even causal, and something to look at when you are working to achieve a state of formlessness, which is your true nature, your true essence. That's why I say that mental asana that you adopt, that I am formless. So you call it amurta asana, is what they call it. Amurta asana. Murta means form. Amurta means no form. So I have the perspective that I do not have a form. Doesn't it the same as here? Isn't you see how they connect in a perfect circle? Not only do I not have a sense of separation, I don't even have a form. So if I don't have a form, how can I own a form? And how can I have an ego attached to the form? So all of those things are denied, eradicated in that pristine atmosphere of I am Atma Brahma. The self is nothing but pure consciousness. And if you just say that as an affirmation, granted, it's not going to be enough. It's a start. You're going to have to prove it to yourself. But it is a good position to adopt. It's certainly much better than I am an ego, or I am my money. This is when a rich person loses his money, he says, I am lost. So really, he's really equating himself with paper and gold. Now, you can see then how that connects to the devotion of non-separation. One, getting rid of the sense of separation, that line drawn on water takes the two apparently divided portions of water and they turn into one again, or that jar filled with water gets smashed, or that jar filled with air, the inside air is the same as the outside air. It's just been encased by a covering. So that brings us back to this idea of sheaths. Now, what I didn't finish and I also started into as well is this chart in accordance with this chart. Remember, we're looking at non-separation as an eternal truth, not as something that has to be proved or not as something that has to be worked up to. It's not something you can get through practice. It's not something that happens through purification. It doesn't happen through evolution. You can't get it through sadhana. It already is. Oneness already is. And that undeniable position or mental asana is how you see the Dalai Lamas and the Swami Vivekanandas and the Ramana Maharshis and the Sri Ramakrishnas and other great souls coming to you in the form. They've only assumed a form. As Shankara said, never identify with the form, but you're free to associate with it once you realize that you're not nature. The father of yoga put it that way. Kaivalya means separation, isolation from nature. There will come a time when everyone will have to isolate themselves from form, and form is created by nature. The formlessness cannot create form. It's a beautiful teaching. God cannot be the cause of anything, the seers say. It's causeless. That's why they call Om the unstruck sound, why they call God the unseen seer, or the causeless cause, or the inactive agent. Everything happens by its presence, but you can't trace that back to a cause. God's causeless and effectless. So they leave it pristine. They leave it completely other. And that's a quote from the Upanishads. Brahman is completely other. It cannot be thought. You can meditate towards it, you can suggest it, you can infer it. Like if I were looking at that mountain and I see smoke, then I could say, well, there's probably fire there. So if you see the smoke of name and form everywhere, then you're probably going to infer, there must be a Brahman substratum around here somewhere, you see. There must be a reality here somewhere because there is relativity dancing on it. Like the dancing girl dances on the stage in front of an audience and then disappears. So you can infer the existence of Brahman, but you can never prove it. And as I was saying, why do you need proof? You should probably be exercising something else than your science when you enter the realm of spirituality. You're going to want to have direct spiritual experience of the thing itself. Not book learning, not words. It's going to pass beyond that level. But those things are essential to it. As Vivekananda said, we want to go beyond Vedas. We want to go beyond Quran. We want to go beyond Bible. But we want to do it by understanding the Quran, the Bible, and the Vedas. So he's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's not an excuse for everyone to say, oh, I don't need wisdom, I don't need knowledge, I can just jump to the source. See, I'm going to need to arm myself with every philosophical method I can possibly learn in this lifetime and the lifetimes to come. I will dedicate myself to it. And so I will never be born in ignorance again. I will wake up one day, and as the song says, I could sing it for you, my ignorance was gone, gone, utterly gone. Why? Because who can contain the truth? Who could keep a blazing fire tied in a cotton cloth? See? Once you're on the trail of truth, it's the hound of heaven. You see? It's after you, it'll never let you go. All you have to do is call it. Bloodhounds get the scent, they don't miss their target, you see. So once you open up and let the truth in through the power of attraction, see, then you're in for it. It's on the crest. It's happening. Now you just have to make the drop. Commit to the drop. You know what I mean about that. Now, as far as this chart, the 5 little Russian dolls, and this chart, the 5 kinds of space go, you can see how Bhutakasha, the space of objects, is that ether which we're living in. And this is called the physical cause to the Indian seers. And they say there are 5 other subtler causes, maybe 6, surrounding that or within it. There's other akashas. So you see, Western science would stop at the physical akasha. That's why it's called physics. They won't venture further. If we're trying to bring quantum physics together with spirituality, if you ask me, I don't think it's going to happen. Not unless they give up their death grip on the atomic particle. Because they're going to have to understand that there's a subtler type of particle. Man does not live by bread alone. That's not going to take just faith in Christ or in Buddha or in some guru or in some path. It's going to take the actual experience of feeling the prana. I mean, great intellectual giants are walking around not breathing. If you get my gist. We were called howlies when we came here. It means breathless. You've got to start to breathe, folks. Take it in, take it out. Let it out, let it in, as the Beatles said. You see? Breathe. That's your first connection to prana. And it's certainly, don't stop there, for heaven's sakes. Don't turn it into an art unto itself, or you'll end up where the Hatha yogis have ended up. Take the prana into the mind, take the mind into the intellect, take the intellect into the great self. Dissolve the mind stream. This is where great souls are born, and where great souls venture. And all trepidation put aside, they will find the truth, and the truth will set them free. And that's it. No compromises, no holding back. There's too much at stake. See? Another lifetime of ignorance. I mean, would you like to be born again with parents and go through school again? I don't know, some of you are pretty young. I'm 63. I do not want to do that again. Decided. Sri Ramakrishna said, would you go and lick up the spittle you spat out 2 minutes ago on the sidewalk? That's how he feels about the past. Granted, the past is a looking glass into some profound things. But basically, you do not want to relive these experiences again you've been there and you've done that. That's what's at stake, is just coming again into repetitious rounds of birth and death, cycles. Kala chakra, Buddha called it, the wheel of time, or samsara, rounds of birth and death and ignorance. So that's what's at stake, is forgetting. And recollection or divine memory is what is waiting you see. Your causal memory at that level of ego, the ego may be a line drawn on water, and it may be effervescent and all that, and ephemeral, but basically it is also a look into the next akasha. You know, I find it kind of funny, you're around people and they say, yeah, you know, I think I was Joan of Arc in a previous lifetime. You know, pick a name out of a hat. And I have to say, you know, that's not the idea of rebirth in India. The idea of rebirth is that you never were any of those personalities. You were always the Atman in each of them. So when you look back and finding out which personality you were, you're identifying with the unreal and you're forgetting the real. It's not going to do you any good. You're just reading the Akashic record. You've heard of the Akashic record, right? Well, this teaching and this teaching are based on the word Akasha, and these take you much deeper than just reading the history of something that's already gone on for ad infinitum, forever, ad nauseum. I mean, Buddha, when he sat under the bo tree, he was done. Christ, when he went into the wilderness, he was done. And he wanted in front of the mass of humanity to show them that they were formless. He was the exemplar, not the savior. And so be thee like the little children, right? Be thee perfect as thy Father in heaven is perfect, is what he said when he came out of the wilderness. And Lord Buddha sat there for 49 days or so under the bo tree just to come out and have nirvana and show people and tell people, you want off the wheel of birth and death. You want out of time. And guess what? You're not going to get out of it until you transcend your ancestors. As far as Sri Ramakrishna was concerned, your ancestors, well, he put it this way, the world is a huge pit and your ancestors are vipers inside. This is how adamant he was about escaping birth with the ancestors. There are nations here today that are worshiping your ancestors. That's it. India almost got caught. And a cross-section of India has been caught in ancestor worship. Egypt got caught in it, embalming kings and killing slaves and burying them with gold for some afterlife, you see. When the Indian seers were transcending the body thousands of years previous to that and showing you how you could do it. You can do it, as my Hungarian nephew says. You can do it. So this transcendence of the ancestor realm is right here. That's why I brought it up. It's the prana. The prana has taken the souls, that is the minds, because soul and mind in our tradition is one and the same. Transmigrating soul is mind. It's mind that's going from place to place. Body stops, gets refashioned, a new body and so forth. But the mind is what's taking you from heaven to earth to hell until you kill that desire for heaven, earth, and hell and your fear of it. So the prana is taking, like I said, out of the nadis, out of these subtle nerves. I don't know how to explain it. If you watched a rain, huge rain come and see all the droplets of water run down the window, you see. You've watched that before, one connects to another and then turns into a larger trickle. That's the wheel of birth and death, you see. Souls are leaving the body and getting into streams. One of the great seers of India, Lord Kapila, said, there are two great streams, two great nadis. It pretty much comes in line with the Kundalini, only there's three there. But the two great streams are the Kaivalya Pragbara and Samsara Pragbara. Kaivalya is a whole stream of souls that are going towards liberation, and Samsara Pragbara are a whole stream of souls that's going towards bondage and rebirth again. You want to get off of that, out of that stream, and get into the stream of consciousness going towards liberation. Because if you're in that stream, you can come back again free. And these souls don't have that choice to do that. They're coming back with the ancestors. And they're subject to the prana. They haven't mastered the prana yet. They've actually got addicted to it. Did you know that the prana is the most addicting substance anywhere? The addict takes cocaine because of the prana in the experience. Food is prana. Sexuality is prana. Everything that anyone desires anywhere is because of the prana. So that's the most addictive substance of all. Breath is life, right? And life is prana. So breath, life, and prana go together as a triputi. You're attached to a pair of lungs. And when you don't have them anymore at death, you freak out, you panic, and you go unconscious. And the next mantra you hear is your own voice saying, wah, 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 as you hang upside down and the doctor's spanking you on the butt, you see, to get that first mantra out of you. I guess they don't do it that way anymore. Can I cut the umbilical cord of ignorance? The midwife cut my umbilical cord when I was a baby. Now I ask, can I as easily cut the umbilical cord of ignorance to my future births? It's the lyrics of a song that I learned in India. Imagine my outright glee when coming from the West and these stupid songs they sing, because I was a musician and I wanted music used for higher purposes, that I found these songs that were explaining philosophical precepts. It's putting the best of both worlds together, you see. Lyric and music with philosophy. I was a kid in a candy store. That's what I wanted. So if you get connected up with the ancestors, you see, Indra, the gods, the goddesses, the demigods, the mains, the asuras, the munis, the siddhas, the Gandharvas, the angels, the ancestors, the nagas, the elementals, the lost spirits, and the pretas, the ghosts. We're all there in that pranic akasha. Cycling. And from that pool are drawn humans. So here's a kind of involution that I have to introduce to Western scientists. You're talking about involution and evolution of matter and species. I'm talking about involution of the soul that happens beyond time through nadis and nerves that are carrying vast amounts of energy that is nothing like your electric or kinetic energy. It's subtle energy, and it becomes psychic too. Prana first, food and all, then psychic. Well, that's the second cause. The first cause is food and matter. The second cause to everything is prana. If you X prana out of the equation, you don't have any way of explaining the world and the body. And then your mantra is, what's the meaning to life? Or why me? See? And other mantras like that, you see. You can't explain things. Can't even explain how you were born and how you die and where you go afterwards. You spend thousands of years arguing about whether God exists or not, when God is existence. You're passing over the non-dual for this whole set of dual considerations, which are all based in illusion. Why do you do that? And why do you keep it up? See, keep up the ruse. Play right into Maya's hands. Strike off thy fetters, bonds that bind thee down, of shining gold or darker baser ore, good, bad, love, hate, and all the dual throng. So strike off your fetters means those fetters of mental misconception that you're holding for lifetimes. If you can do that and you can transcend the realm of your ancestors, call it lower heaven, then you can get to a kind of higher heaven. It's called the Chittakasa, you see, the space of thought. The space of objects and the space of energy has been mastered. Transcended means when you know a thing, you master it. And then when you master it, you can transcend it. Then you can use it again. So you'll see the seers and the illumined souls using energy and matter in a lot different way than ignorant souls are doing. So you come to a level of the space of thought, and you're getting up to the idea of manus, yogis, arhats, sages, avaduts, mahatmas, paramahamsas, rishis, seers. Sometimes they give it the name tapar loga because tapa means austerity. These are souls that have become strong through renunciation. They're not laboring anymore under the sense of agency, sense of ownership, the sense of separation. They got over that long ago. They're mature souls, if the phrase can be allowed. So they have arrived at the Chittakasha, space of thought, the realm of the sages, the mind-born sons. There, in such an inward realm, in the kingdoms of heaven within you, you give birth to mind-born sons. heredity, genetics, bloodline, all that has nothing to do with it. You think, and the child is born. Why aren't we doing that here? Oh, my wife left me. Oh, where'd you meet her? In a bar. What did you expect? See, our children turned out really bad. Oh, why? See? Did you meditate before you had a child? Did you conceive of a child? Did you bring it in with light? Did you usher it in? See, once it gets there, upbringing and all that, that's karmic. It's its own business. But you can provide a place for that soul to come through with your own mental capacity. But you're not doing that. See? So, mind-born sons, it's a beautiful teaching, really. If you go to a deeper level, then you get to the space of intelligence. As I was saying, this is where things get really good, because you've gone from the gross to the ethereal to the subtle. You're getting to the causal, the jnana, kasha, they call it. Akasha space, jnana, wisdom. It's the space of wisdom. It's where sages and seers and other souls like to spend their time. And they'll do it even when they're on earth. 250 of these so far have come from my spending time in the Jnana-kasha in a human body. This is what I think about. This is what I think about presenting. And it's not just for presenting to see, look how many charts I did. You see, it's because I myself am benefiting from it, from thinking that way. Do you think I suffer ignorance? You think people ask me, are you enlightened? I said, my ignorance died. Is that enlightenment? If it is, I'm enlightened. See? So get rid of your ignorance. And you can, there's nahi jnanena sadrishyam bhavitramiha vidyate, Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita. There's the greatest purifier in all the worlds is wisdom. There's no greater purifier than that. And it's the only thing that will destroy ignorance. If you're deep enough in the art of devotion, yes, that can destroy your ignorance. But it's very rare you find a soul destroying their ignorance through devotion. They're going to have to mate it with higher wisdom, because that gets rid of it quick. In one lifetime, your ignorance can go away. That's how important the Jnana-kasha is, and Jnana in particular is. So the devotion of non-separation, devotion is the bhakti part, non-separation is the wisdom part. Because the highest wisdom is non-duality. Not book learning or scripture. Non-duality is the highest wisdom. It's a position you adopt. My mind will stay there now, thank you. It won't go anywhere else. So you're not going to be able to do that with a restless mind. The restless mind occupies these other peripheries. Krishna told Arjuna the same in the Gita. He said, slothful beings are born to slothful parents. Restless beings are born to restless minds and restless wombs. Sattvic people are born to balanced parents and balanced wombs. Like attracts like. So you can't blame God and devil for all this. This is the way things are according to karma. Karma is the God of this universe. You have never seen God here, and you'll never see God here because God is not in the world. The world is in God. And this is the worlds that are in God, you see. If you identify with them, you're a spider on a web. You can't go anywhere. But if you freely associate with them, and with the nadis, and with the divine energy, and you take it up the spine, as far as the Kundalini system is concerned, then it's the same with the Yoga Vashishta system here, and the same with his system here. You cannot confine space. You see. Ram asks him, Ram's a teenager in this case, the song we just sang to the great avatar Ram, he was a teenager once. So he asks Lord Vashishta, how can you confine space in a jar? How can the ego get into a limited space? See? And so Vashishta tells him stories about beings who confine themselves into a space and will never move out of it for lifetimes. Like, bears in caves, moles in holes. That's their life. It's all they want. This pickish existence has gotten into the very marrow of my bones. Who said that? One of the most compassionate women who ever lived, Sri Sharda Devi. This piggish, animalistic existence people live has gotten into the very marrow of my bones. I don't know why they want to suffer like that. When freedom is relatively an easy thing. At least that's the mental asana you should be taking. I will get freedom in this lifetime. Or better yet, I am free. Ever free, never bound. So if you were to transcend a causal loka like that, you would go to this chid akasha. Don't confuse it with the chit akasha. Chit is thought, chid is consciousness. So here you've got these beings. The Vairajas are the 7 souls of the 7 inner worlds they preside over. There's Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma, or in their other order, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the Trinity. There's the avatars there, and Ishvara, the highest rendering of consciousness in form the human mind can conceive of is Ishvara. That's where you're praying to. You can't pray to Brahman. Brahman doesn't have ears. They're courting the Brahmaloka, and they are there like this baby and the mother. Brahman and Shakti are one. They're in a causeless area. So we say here, like 5 little Russian dolls, which neatly nest inside of one another, all ending up as one all-inclusive unit. Similarly, do the 5 atmospheres, through which name and form manifest, all reside within each other, from causeless to causal to subtle to gross, each holding multiple dimensions, countless worlds, and myriad beings. That's cosmology. Cosmology first, philosophy second, spirituality will then come. In order to know who you are, you have to know what you're not, and you're not any of this. You're not a form. And that's the non-dual. That's the devotion of non-separation. That's where their devotion lies. Not to the worlds, to the beings, and to the countless lokas, to the foundation of all of those. Keeping track of that is extremely difficult to do. You can catch a glimpse of it, it escapes you. Not only from lifetime to lifetime, from day to day. You can be in perfect possession of it for a week, and all of a sudden, what was that again? See? How did I understand that? I can taste it, but I can't really get it back, you see. It's very, very subtle. It's causal. It's causeless. English language runs out of words for it. So I wanted to finish out those 2 charts in conjunction with one another. And in the time remaining, which looks like about, to me, 20 minutes, concentrate a little bit more on the devotional side of things. Bhakti is the path for most people in this age. Jnanam is for a special few. But bhakti really is the main path. People come to God through love. And love has its companions like faith, devotion, sacrifice, shraddha, all of that. So through devotion, beings have reached a very high state of reality. In the bhakti path, it's called prema bhakti. Basically, in bhakti path, you see a lot of people practicing gauna bhakti, that is, or sometimes they call it vaidya bhakti, or vaidhi bhakti, that means ritualism. Yes, when you see ritualism going on, you have to look deeper. It can become very, very pedantic and plodding and soulless. But then Holy Mother said, beings have been reaching God through ritualism too. So the devotional temperament considers ritual very important. It's just that it happens again in 3 phases. The outer ritual, and then, and I was showing you this mudra earlier, this means what's there is here. So when you do a puja, you point it at the shrine and you go, that is here. What is there is here. And you see sometimes Sri Ramakrishna in one of his famous poses is holding that mudra. It means what is here is also there, and what is there is also here. That's the devotion of non-separation. Even an object is worthy of worship. If the object happens to be your husband or your wife, then even more worthy of worship. See, because that's the sentient principle there that you're worshiping. That's the Shiva-Shakti relationship. That would be something very worthwhile to pursue. So, a second level of that kind of bhakti is called raga bhakti. You're getting a great pleasure out of doing a ritual now. The ritual was attended by being very careful not to doing anything wrong or reciting anything wrong. Everything has to be clean and spotless. Everything has to be enacted just right. So the deity will be pleased, because the deity is represented by the forms. It's not image worship we're talking about. It's worship of what the image represents. For instance, if you didn't believe in, if you only believed in the gross cause, then ritualism would just end up. But if you believed in the prana, that there was a life force in there, then you could invest the ritual with that, and you begin to see that the image is invested with prana. And that's how a divine personage comes through his picture. Sri Ramakrishna saw a picture of himself once for the first time he'd never seen. Photography was a very infantile science back then, 1860s. So he saw a picture of himself someone had taken he didn't know about. He said, "This picture shows a man in a very high state of samadhi." And later he said, "This will be worshipped by hundreds and thousands of people in the future." Imagine saying that about your own picture. Talk about ego. This is teaching on ego here. This picture will be worshipped by hundreds of thousands of people in the future. Mother's telling me this. And 4 million, 5 million now are worshipping that picture on their altars. So is his presence coming through those pictures? Holy Mother used to say, when I offered the food to Sri Ramakrishna in the puja, I would wait until I see a light come out of his eye and bless the food. Then I would give it to the devotees, because I know it was prasad now. So she could actually see the prana in the form of a beam of light coming out of the picture's eye and blessing the food. So ritualism has some very, very deep elements to it that are infused with bhakti, devotion. And it can get so deep, then you get to that third level of bhakti called prema bhakti. I mentioned it earlier. Ecstatic love for God. The kind of love that made Radha go out of her house half nude in the morning. She was usually so careful about herself, She was so in love with Krishna that she completely forgot some of her clothing, and went out. So prema bhakti causes you to forget the world and the body, which is usually so dear to you. The body is everything to you. Vivekananda said, "I've never seen such worship of the body since I came to America. Thousands of instruments for paring the nails, combing and brushing the hair, the toilet." He said he was just totally aghast. This is a man who took a water pot and walked around the world with a loincloth on. He gets here, gah. So the body's usually so dear to you, but you forget about it completely in prema bhakti, in the same way that you would forget about it in Brahma samadhi, that is, in the, we're calling it Brahmagyan, the highest wisdom. So there's how you fuse the devotion of non-separation together into a good packet, you see. The devotion and the deepest devotion and the highest wisdom coexist naturally with one another. Not something that you have to make a fusion out of, and probably turn it into confusion along the way. It's something that's already one. So this is a way that Mirabai, a great woman devotee, Bhakta, who worshipped Krishna, she found it out. And many of the teachings of Vaishnavism, that is, worshippers of Vishnu and worshippers of Krishna and worshippers of Ram, and the great beings that go with them, Lakshman, Hanuman, other great souls that you've heard of that were devotees of these beings, have looked at it that way. I really wanted to put it side by side with the non-touch yoga, but we probably don't have time for that. Maybe next Sunday we can go on with that. For the meantime, you can see here what I mentioned in the first half. There are 4 things which are very dear to the devotee. One is to be dear to God, samipya. One is to be in the same loka as God. It's called salokya. Loka means one of these realms. If God comes to the ancestor realm, he wants to be with him. If God comes to earth, he wants to be with him. If God comes among the seers, the devotees, he wants to be with him. Those are called Ishvara Kotis. Christ had 12, Buddha had 8, Ramakrishna had 16. You can always tell an avatar by these great souls that attend upon him. And also that he loves the fallen and the lowly. He's not just there for a few adept gyanis, but his main sights are set on patita pavana, the fallen and the lowly. Like Vivekananda said, I love my God the good, but I love my God the suffering, the poor, and I love my God the evil even more. Don't do this at kids' home, at home kids, but basically that's a great soul that can even convince an evil person to give up their darkness and seek higher things. So if you want to be in the same loka as God, you'll probably be one of those adherents to the Avatara-vada, the path of those who follow the avatar whenever he's going to be reborn on earth in a body. Usually they remain formless, or they would remain in a realm like this, you see, in a causal realm. They'll keep a causal body. You have a causal body too, it's called deep sleep body. But they're totally in know of their causal body, and they know it's there, and they know how to inhabit it, and they know how to use it. Past master is a phrase we often use for them. Not just masters, but past masters, like Krishna. So the same loka as God, that's what the bhaktas want. They want to be there with God. In fact, they would rather have that than the formless Brahman. They would rather be with the form of God. They think it's better. They like that better. It's interesting arguments that go on between those kinds of souls too. They take different positions. Remember once my teacher was talking about non-dual samadhi, and someone asked him, oh, what about, Sri Ramakrishna said, I'd rather eat sugar than be sugar. In other words, being with the form of God. I prefer that than being in a formless state. And we thought maybe he'd caught my teacher off guard, but my teacher was a staunch non-dualist, so he said, that person didn't know the bliss of being sugar. So, something else to think about. Whatever the case, I would say, I wish either one of them on you. And both, if you can handle it, because they're both very high states of samadhi. The one's called bhava samadhi and one's called abhava samadhi. See, either I'm empty or I'm nothing, which means empty of suffering, empty of form, empty of problems, but full of consciousness. Or they call it sometimes savikalpa and nirvikalpa. God with form, God beyond form. Or God with attributes and God without attributes. Nirguna and saguna Brahman. That was the way the ancient rishis of India, pre-Vedanta, talked about that. God with attributes and God without attributes. Both were true to them. The third one here is take the same form as God. I want to be like God. And, people do that even unconsciously. You need it. How races look like their avatars. Chinese and Japanese and so forth look like Lord Buddha. The Indian people I know look like Krishna or Shiva. We look like Christ, many of us. We have those features, Caucasian features from out of Europe and so forth. So we actually take on the form that we worship, either knowingly or unknowingly, secretly or openly. We have an ideal back inside of us. Some of us have just not found it yet and brought it forth, or some of us hide it, or some of us just don't know about it yet. So Sarupya, same form as God, and then Sayujya, to be immersed in God. Now this is sort of the doorway where I'd say that devotion and non-separation come together. How you can really make sense out of them, Sayujya. It's like nirvana, they describe it. So actually those practicing bhakta, although they probably wouldn't admit it, also broke the formless. Because if you get immersed in Brahman, just like Prahlada, that quote we were reading about Prahlada, sometimes I feel like I am God, other times I feel like I'm his servant when I become aware of my ego. So I actually shift back and forth between formlessness and form. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. It comes to mind, you see. So sometimes you feel like form, sometimes you feel like being formless. So if you get that spiritually versatile, and you have that much ability, and you hold that much capacity, which is of course based on qualification and practice, then you can do that. You can pass. And Sri Ramakrishna was passing all the time between those kinds of samadhis. He experienced samadhis that weren't in the scriptures. The Brahmin priests would gather around him with their scriptures and they'd say, "Did you have this samadhi?" "Yeah, I had that one." "Did you have this samadhi?" "Oh yeah, I had that a long time ago." See? So, and then he would one-upmanship them and go, "But I also had Unmana Samadhi, I had Sthiti Samadhi, I had Hatat Samadhi." They flip through their pages. "I don't see those." So he was off the map. He was having samadhis that weren't listed in either the Tantric or the Vedic scriptures. So that's how versatile he was. But he was a quick study. Avatar is a quick study. He used to hang out on the outskirts of his village, Kamarpakur, which we just visited a few weeks ago, some of us. And there, at that time, all the holy men would cross by there on their way to the 4 pilgrimage points. And so they'd stop there and have their Duni fires. Little Gadadhar, the future Sri Ramakrishna, to be worshipped by 5 million people, sat there and started their fire and stuffed their pipes so they could smoke and listened. And he had a memory that was amazing. More than a photographic memory. This was, you hear it, you remember it for all time. So he would listen to songs, to teachings from the different scriptures that these different people from various lineages would talk about and share and argue about, and immediately pick them all up. So he was like this walking map of philosophy and songs and wisdom songs and so forth before he was even a teenager. So that kind of prolific memory, they say, is gained. The ordinary man has to gain that through celibacy and through fidelity and faithfulness and retaining of energies. But the avatar has it in spades and will demonstrate it when they come to earth. So as far as a bhakti teaching that leads us towards the devotion of non-separation, Ananya Bhakti, that's a good one. First, get close to God, try and be born in the same loka, and assume the form of God, and get immersed in God. And then you'll understand what devotion of non-separation is all about. Then you'll sing songs like the Vaishnavas do. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha means praises, Lord, eternal praises, never-ending praises, ever be unto thee, O adorable one. Thou hast taken the devotees from earth to the highest realm of consciousness. You have opened my eyes, given me insight, and cleared my perception of doubts and imperfections. Therefore, to thee, O beloved, I offer all that I am. And so then would experience immersion into Brahman. Because what else is the seer and the sage if not Brahman? Are they their form? So why are you getting so attached to their form? They will teach you. God is not a personality. God is a principle. And so you too will go beyond form, as dear as that form may be to you, and experience the highest samadhi. That's what they want for you. Then all this coming and going, Vivekananda said, will be mere nonsense. Born, dying, living, born, dying, living. All mere nonsense. You'll see that all movement is ephemeral, transitory, illusory, and you'll stay in one place forevermore. Like a wooden statue for 700 years at a time. Experience samadhi, or at least very profound meditation. Well, I feel like it's a good time to begin to bring things to a close. So we'll take up some more devotional topics in conjunction with the non-separation, because you know where I'm going with this now. It's kind of the union of bhakti and jnanam, or the explanation of how devotion can be towards the formless, as odd as that might seem. I love the formless. It's rather contrary way of thinking or saying. It's rather dichotomous hippopotamus. See? But still, there it is. You love what you know, and you know what you love. So in that vein, then, we will return next Sunday here, live streaming with the audience. Thank you for joining us. And we will take up this topic for another class before our West Coast visit. So here I'll end with a chant. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamoya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Shri Shri Mata Sharada Devi Jaga Janani Namo Namah. Shri Shri Mata Sharada Devi Jaga Janani Namo Namah. Swarupaya Rama Krishnaya Namo Namah. Deva Devi Swarupaya Shri Rama Krishna